If you think you're watching this for the first time, no, you're not. You've just forgotten about it. The information contained herein is highly classified, cannot be taken beyond, and is brought to you by the letter Sigma and the number. I read There Is No Antimemetics Division a little while ago, and my child didn't destroy it, so I was able to return it to the library. Let's see if this works. Wait, no. There we go. So I want to start by saying I did enjoy this book, and I recommend it, especially if it's available at your local library. It's categorized as science fiction horror and follows the exploits of a secret organization that contains and studies supernatural phenomena. Spoiler warning from this point forward, though I'm not going to expound on every plot point, and I'm not sure I understood the end enough to actually spoil it, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The origins of the book are pretty interesting. There's a website called the SCP Foundation, which is a collaborative fictional universe centered on the exploits of a secret organization that contains and studies supernatural phenomena. Wait, did I already say that? The site's primary presentation is a catalog of database entries for all of the various entities and objects that have been encountered. If you've heard of any of these entities, then you've probably heard of SCP-173, not pictured here. A concrete sculpture which is immobile while observed, but moves at breakneck speed in the blink of an eye, which is to say, if you blink, then it will break your neck. Most of the storytelling on the site is contextual. You are given the description of the sculpture and its dangerous nature, but how that came to be known is left to your imagination. The book's author, who styles himself Quantum, is a contributor to the site. Most notably, he conceived SCP-55, and through that entry, he introduced the concept of an anti-meme. Broadly speaking, an anti-meme is information that can't be propagated. And honestly, that is really quite clever. In a universe where the primary activity is building information, what could be more horrifying than the inability to retain anything? There is also a separate section on the website for more traditional storytelling, and Quantum made a number of contributions there as well. In fact, this is where the bulk of the book originates. Now, you can't lift ideas directly from the site and use them for profit, even if you wrote them. So he had to file off the serial numbers, so to speak. The ASCP Foundation becomes the organization, entities become unknowns, that kind of thing. I wasn't aware of it before now, but stitching together different stories into a novel is a known phenomenon. It's called a fix-up. It happened a lot with speculative fiction, starting in the 1950s, when there was increased demand for books. A bunch of authors had collections of stories on hand that had been published in various magazines, so they slapped them together, did some editing to make the whole more cohesive, and sent it off to the publisher. These fix-ups evidently varied in quality, but to my knowledge, I've never come across one before, so I can't say how the present book measures up. All I can say is there was a noticeable flaw in the reading experience. One aspect that bothered me as I went through it was how some parts felt disconnected from the whole, and the fact that it was made from disparate parts pretty well explains that. I could write it off and say that fix-up novels aren't for me, but it's deeper than that. The problem with including things irrelevant to the plot is that you set the precedent for the reader that some things can be ignored. Then, when new characters or ideas are introduced, the reader is less invested. I made nearly the same argument in my video about the Jack Reacher book. Authors, if you feel the need to pad the word count, at least make the words count. Let's talk about some examples, keeping in mind that I don't have the book, and I didn't take notes, so I'm going off of memory. First off, this obelisk thing on the cover shows up in one chapter where some redshirt dies, and then is never mentioned again. I think it's some sort of monument that the general public can't see. It's literally almost non-existent. In another chapter, a new employee gets attacked by a memory-stealing entity, whom he defeats by using a brick of hard drives as a weapon. And then it turns out he's actually a seasoned employee who forgot who he was. It's a fun little vignette that's completely disconnected from anything else. Then there's the opening chapter. By virtue of it being the beginning, it does introduce us to some things that stay relevant. The protagonist, Marie, for instance, also the concept of antimemetics, and the concept of mnestics, drugs which are the opposite of amnestics. So instead of causing memory loss, they aid memory retention with varying levels of potency. And yet, even with all this, the opening story still manages to feel very self contained. Marie meets with the director of the entire organization, but I don't remember him showing up again. She also kills an entity, but there's no long term consequences of that. No follow up, no studying it to learn something, nothing. In another chapter, a new employee gets attacked by a memory stealing entity, whom he defeats by using a brick of hard drives as a weapon. Wait, did I already say that? About three-fourths of the way through the book, Marie dies, and the big bad monster takes over the world, or destroys it, or remakes it in his image, or something. We then start following her husband, who has some sort of resistance factor, and he brings her back to life, I think, so she can activate the monster defeating device. It gets weirdly abstract at the end and didn't really work for me. Some ambiguity in storytelling is good. It allows the audience to fill in the gaps with their imagination. Remember the FCP website? Kind of like that. I tend to prefer it that way rather than having everything detailed out. But you need to be careful because the bigger the idea, the more ambiguity will strain the audience to the point where they decide the extra mental effort isn't worth it. All in all, the book was entertaining, but left me feeling like it could have been better. Wait, did I already say that? Well, that was certainly a lot of fun, wasn't it? Join us next week as I read to you the entirety of James Joyce's Ulysses.